You are watching Auth Masterclass, and today we are going to start with the user registration flow. So we'll start the project from scratch. So I have opened VS Code. Feel free to open whatever favorite code editor that you want to use. And what I will do, I'll start by creating a npm project. So I'll say npm init-y. So what this will do, this will create a package.json for me. Now once this is done, I want to do two things here. First thing that I want to do is to add the type, and I want to make it as module. So what will happen because of this? So I don't have to use the required syntax. I'll be using the import syntax. Then I will add a dev script, and this will be running nodemon, then src index.js. If you want, you can add more script, but for the purpose of this demo, for now I'll be sticking to only the dev script. Then this being done, so we are saying src index.js. So let us create that folder. So src, and within this I will say index.js. Then let us install some dependency. So I'm going to install npm install. Of course, this will be an Express app, and we are going to use MongoDB. So I'll install mongoose, and to read the environment variables, I'm going to use .env. So let me install these three first, then as and when time comes, we'll install more and more dependencies based on our need. Now that being done, what I will do, on the project root, I'll create a .env file. So this will have all our environment variables. So first environment variable will be port, and I am adding 8000 here. If you want to add a different port, feel free to do that, but make sure the port is not used by any other process. Then what I will do, I'll say mongo URI. So mongo URI. So this is where I'll add the MongoDB connection. So a MongoDB instance is running in my system. So if you already have a running instance, feel free to use that. If you want, you can use it through Docker. If you want, you can go for a cloud service provider. There are plenty of choices for having a MongoDB. So what I'm going to do, I have a local instance running, so I'll point to that one. So I'll say MongoDB : / then localhost and port number 27017. Okay, and then you have to give the database name. So I'm just going to say auth. Feel free to give whatever name you want, right? Now this being done, what we will do, we'll go to our index.js file. We will start setting up our Express app. So what I will do, I will say import Express from Express, then import .env from .env, and I will say import mongoose from mongoose, then .env.config. So after this line, we'll be able to read the .env file and its key value pair, right? Then I will say const app equals to express, and I will call the express function. And then what I will do, I'll create a IFI. Okay, that is immediately invoked function execution. And here I will write a async function like this. And inside this async function, what I will do, I'll add a first try catch block. So because here in this block, I want to connect to the MongoDB. So it's always safe to put it in a try catch block. And let me first quickly add the catch block, right? So it is easy. So I'll say console.log failed to start the server, and we will add the error message, whatever it is, right? And here what I can do, I can say process.exit with non-zero code. That means abruptly it will terminate. If I say exit 0, that means it has ended successfully, but this is not the case here. That is what it means, non-zero exit code. That means it did not exit successfully. So what I will do, I'll say process.exit 0. That means it will quit the server process. If it failed to connect to database, or if there is any exception, it will immediately kill the process. So no point in starting the server, right? And then what I will say, I'll say const port equals to process.env.port. Okay, and const, I will say mongo URI equals to process.env, and what I will do, I will copy from here and paste it here, right? So I have added these two environment variables in a JavaScript variable, right? Then what I can do, I can say await mongoose.connect. Connect where? On the Mongo URI, right? So I'll connect it to Mongo URI. Then once this is done, what I can do, I can say console.log. I'll say successfully connected to DB, right? Then I'll say app.listen. So now once DB connection is done, we'll start listening the app on where? On the given port, and I'll add a callback function. This will say console.log. I'll use backticks. So I'll say server started on port, and I'll give the port number. Okay. Now this much logic is done. I will save this one, and I will come to the terminal, and I'll say npm run dev. Let us see if it is starting or if we are getting any error, right? Let us check. Okay, so it says successfully connected to DB and server started on port 8000, right? So to test this one, let us create a ping API. Okay, so just a dummy API in which the path will be ping and will respond a pong message. Okay, so I'll say app.use. Okay, and I will say /ping, and it will take request and response. And what this will do, this will say rest.status of 200, and I'll say JSON, and it will take a message which will say pong. Okay, very simple implementation, right? And we are getting some error here. Let us check. And why it is giving error? The semicolon is missing. So if I add that semicolon and if I save this one, so it will again start the server. Okay, so what I can do, I can open Postman, right? Here is the Postman, and here what I will do, I will quickly go to the ping API on this port 8000 in localhost, and I'll send a get request. Okay, so if I send this one, it will say message as pong, right? So our server setup is successfully done, right? Then let us move to next step. Then what we will start with, we'll start with user registration, right? And for that we need a DB schema. So let us first start working on our schema file. So on the src, I'll create a folder and call it as schema. And here what I will do, I'll add a new file and call it as user.schema.js. Okay, so this is where I'll store the user schema. So first thing what I have to do, I have to import mongoose. So import mongoose from mongoose, right? Then I will say const user schema equals to new mongoose.schema, and it will take a schema object, right? So what will be the content of the schema object? So basic things too, we need the username and password, right? Optionally, if you want, you can add email implementation also. In my implementation, I'm using email also, right? So I'll say username. Okay, then what will be this type? Type will be string. Is this required? So of course this is required, right? So I'll say true. And is this going to be unique? So no two users should have the same username, right? So I'm going to mark it as unique. Okay, then I'll say password. Okay, what will be the password? So type will of course be string. And is this going to be required? So of course this is also going to be required. Okay, then what else we can add? If you want, you can add another optional field called email. Okay, as such we are not going to do anything with email like sending an email or any other validation, but just for the sake of completeness, I'm keeping email. If you want, you can skip it or just have it. Okay, so I'm going to say type of string, and I'm going to say mark it as required as true. Okay, great. Now this being done, what I will do here, I will say here I'll add a property. Okay, and I'll say timestamps to true. That means it will create the created at and updated at timestamp in the user document. Okay, so I'll say timestamp as true. So I'll say const user equals to mongoose.model, and I will say user, and which schema I will pass? I will pass the user schema. Then export default user, right? So I'll export. Great. So our DB schema is done, right? Now what we will do, we'll create the router and service layer. Okay, so what will happen, the service layer will do the heavy lifting. It will have all the business logic, and the route layer or the controller layer, it will call the service method only after all the middleware validation passes, right? So middleware validation like Captcha validation is correct, CSRF validation is correct, right? Those kind of validation it will do. Authentication is valid, right? So that kind of validation it will do, and then it will pass the control to the service layer. So what I can do, let me write the service layer for user registration. Okay, so here on parallel to schema, inside the src, I'll create a new folder and I'll call it as services or service. I'm making it plural. Okay, here also I'm saying schemas, so I'm saying services. Okay, and here what I can do, I can say new file and I can say user registration.service.js. okay, and here I will add a method export const, I'll say register user equals to, this is going to be an async function. This will take the, this is going to take the request and response. Okay, now of course I need MongoDB, so I'll say import mongoose from mongoose. Okay, then if you see the user schema, what fields we are expecting? Username, password and email. So this value we will get from the post body, right? So I'll say const username, password and email from where? From request.body. okay, this equal sign is missing. Okay, request.body. okay, now first thing that we have to check, we will use this username and check if this username already exists in the DB, right? If this username already exists, we will throw error. If not, then we will proceed to the next step, right? Why? Because username should be unique always, right? So we cannot have duplicate username. So here also we are seeing unique in the schema level. So we'll do the same validation at the service level also. So what we can say, I can say const existing user, and here I don't need the mongoose import, but rather what I want the user schema that we defined previously, right? So I'll say import user from schemas user.schema, right? And here I should add .js extension, otherwise this import syntax will throw error, right? Then what I can do, I can say, of course I have to await, right? And user dot find one by what? Find one by username. Okay, so if a user exists, right? So if we get a existing user, then what we can do, we can say return response.status 400, that is bad request, right? And we'll say JSON. okay, and we'll say message username already taken, right? You can add whatever error message you want, right? Then now username, password and email we have, right? And this username doesn't exist. Now what we need to do, we need to set it in the database. But before setting in the database, what we need to do, we need to hash the password, right? So for that, what we have to do, we have to add a library bcrypt.js, right? So let me quickly add that library. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to kill the server. Then what I will say, I will clear the console and I will say npm install bcrypt. Okay, great. Now that is done. So what I can say, I will come to the user registration service and I will import it. So I'll say import bcrypt from bcrypt. Okay, then what I can say, I can say const hashed password equals to, I will say await, okay, bcrypt dot hash. Okay, hash what? Hash the password. And how many round of hashing it will do? It will do 10 rounds. Okay, now remember 10 is kind of convention or a sweet spot, right? So the less round you will do, the easier it will be to run a brute force dehashing algorithm, right? As such, there is no dehashing algorithm. Hash is a one-way function, but the less number of rounds you have, the less securities, and the more number of round you are adding, the more CPU intensive it will be, right? The more performance intensive it will be. So 10 is like kind of a sweet spot. Okay, so that's why I'm keeping 10. Maybe 12, 16 you can do, but not more than that. Okay, then I will say const new user equals to new user. Okay, and here I will say username, and I will say password as the hashed password. Okay, and I will say the email. Okay, and why it is giving squiggly error? Because here it should be bracket. Okay, normal parenthesis, right? Then I will say await new user dot save. Okay, so this will actually save it to the database, right? And we will say rest dot status of what? 201. Okay, that is created, resource created, right? And I will say JSON, and I will add a message. Okay, so user registered successfully. Okay, and with this our service layer is done. Okay, then what we will do, we'll create the route for this one. So on src, I'll create a new folder and I'll call it as routes.js. Okay, and here what I can do, I'll add a new file and I'll call it as auth.routes.js. so all auth related operation like register, login, get captcha, get CSRF token, everything will add here. Okay, so first thing what I need to import express from express, right? Then I will say const router equals to express.router. Okay, and in this router I'll add a post method. Okay, post method on slash register. Okay, and what this will do, this will call the register user method. Okay, now this being done, what I will do, I will say export default router, so that we can import in main and then attach it to a middleware. I will come here and I will say app.use. Okay, on slash auth, what we will do, we will, let me first import that one. Okay, so import auth router from where, dot slash, and what this is saying, so this folder name I have given it as routes.js. it should be only routes. Okay, routes, and within that I have auth.routes.js. okay, so now I'll come to index and I will say dot slash routes slash auth.routes.js, and this auth route, what I can do, I'll edit here. Okay, so what will be the URL? It will be auth and then slash register, right? So our API URL, that is localhost :8000 slash auth slash register. That's how the API path will be here, right? So what I will do, I'll quickly start the server and let us check if there are any errors. Otherwise we'll go to Postman. Okay, so it is saying cannot find user registration service on routes, right? So what we will do, we will say .js. okay, what else? And again here I'll use semicolon. Okay, so once I use semicolon, it will again successfully connected to DB server started on port 8000, right? Now I'll quickly open Postman. Okay, and I will go to auth, and here I have register user. Okay, so here what I am saying, email, username and password, this value I am going to send. Okay, then I will send this request, and there is some error, we will check. Okay, and it is saying request body as it is undefined. Okay, so why is that? Because we have to add another middleware so that it can parse the body. So let us quickly do that. So I'll say app.use, I'll say express.json. okay, now we will be able to parse the body. So I will come to Postman and I will send another request. Okay, and what it is saying, user registered successfully. right? So I will open MongoDB for you, and here I have the auth database and I have opened user. I'll do a refresh. Okay, so if you see username admin, email, whatever email value we have added, and if you see password, right, this password is hashed, so it is not plain text password. Okay, great. Now this part is done. User registration part is done here, right? Now next what we will do, let us add captcha to this, right? So you must have seen captchas, right? So these are images, right, that bots and automated system cannot read, right? Because of course images cannot be read, right, whether it is what is given in the image, right? So who can read? Only humans can read, right? So what captcha will do, we as a human, we have to interpret the image and add its text to the captcha field, right? So what we can do, we have to add captcha to our user registration service, right? So let us do that. We'll do step by step, and I'll show you how we can integrate captcha into our API. So for that, let us add few libraries. Okay, so what I will do, I will come to the VS Code and I'll kill the process. Okay, then we need few services, we need few npm packages, right? So what I will do, I will come here and I will say npm install. Okay, now first that I need is express session. Okay, so all the captcha information are going to be managed through a session, express session, right? So we need this library so that we can create session, assign it to the particular user, and based on that we'll attach properties and then read the properties. Okay, so I'll show you how it will be done, but this is the express session npm package that we are going to use. Okay, and one more library, svg captcha, right? So svg captcha is the library that will help us to generate the captcha image. Okay, so we will quickly install this. Great. Now what we will do, I'll come to index and I will set up the express session here. Okay, so what I will do, I will say import session from express session. Okay, and after our app is configured, I'll say app.use. Okay, I'll say session and I will pass few configuration value. Okay, so first it need a session secret, so I will go to env, I will add a session secret. So for this what I will do, I will paste this line, session secret equals to a long string of text. Okay, so this will be my session secret. This will securely stay in the server so that nobody can mess around with my session variables or they try to hack into the or hijack into the session. Okay, so I will say process.env dot, and what I will do, I will come here and copy this one. So I'll say session secret. Then what I will do, I'll say resave to false. Okay, then save uninitialized to true and cookie. So this will generate cookie, right? So what this will do, this will inject cookie into the response, right? And it will have a cookie ID. Next time when the request is sent, we have to pass this cookie. We as in we in the Postman, right? If you are doing it in the browser, once the cookie is set, it will be automatically sent on your subsequent request. Okay, so when you are dealing it in the browser, you don't have to do anything. Because we are doing it in the Postman, we will keep on sharing the cookie. Okay, so this app.use will by default inject the cookie. Okay, so what this cookie will do, so we'll say max age of how much, this will be in seconds. Okay, so I am going to say around 3 minutes. Okay, and HTTP only to be true. Okay, now what is HTTP only to be true? That means only server side code can read this cookie. Client or JavaScript cannot read this cookie. Okay, that means this cookie will be secure from client side attacks. Okay, only our server can read this cookie. So this express session is done. This will inject a cookie in our request. Okay, then what we can do, let us go to service and write a service that will generate a captcha for us and it will set it in the session. So I'll say new file. I'll show you what I mean by that. Okay, so I'll say captcha.service.js. okay, and what I will do, I will first import, okay, import svg Captcha from SVG Captcha library that we have installed, right? Then I will say export const generate captcha equals to request and response. Okay, then I will say const captcha equals to svg captcha dot create, and it will take few configuration. Okay, now I'll say size to be say 5. Okay, so how big you want the captcha to look, right? And ignore characters, right? Few characters it will ignore. Now why you want to ignore some characters? Say for example 0 and O, they might look similar, right? So this will create unnecessary confusion, right? 1 and I, this small I, this might look similar when the image is generated, right? So this is my choice, right? I don't want to add this, I don't want to add any confusion, right? I'll say noise. Noise means how much disturbance in the image that you want, right? So I'll say 2, and I'll say color to be true. Okay, so these are the configuration. Now if you go to svg captcha here, right, the definition here, you will see these many options, right? If you want to check the config object, right? So size, right, it says number, the length of the random string, right? Then it has width, height, right, font size, character preset. So many options are there, right? Color, inverse. So if you want, you can play around and experiment with different options, right? And there is another interesting operation, math operation, right? So you must have seen few websites where they give math problems, right? So instead of giving a captcha image or a numbers, there will be a mathematical equation, easy to solve, right? Like 11 plus 7. So what will be the value? But they will be in image format, right? So that also you can do if you want, right? So math min and max value you can set, then it will start generating the math operation equations in your captcha, right? So but for my purpose, I'm just going to stick with normal text. Okay, then what I will do, I will say request dot session dot captcha. So in the request session that we have created, I am adding a variable captcha, right? And what will be the value? It will be captcha dot text, right? So what this, so if you see this create option, right, that I showed you previously, we have config object and it returns captcha object, right? So if you inspect captcha object, what this will return? This will return text. Okay, the text in plain text format, and the data which is set type of image svg, the svg image in the string. Okay, so this will be the image and this will be the plain text, right? Because we need both. We'll send the image to the user and we will set the text of the same image in our captcha in our session. Okay, now user has to read the captcha and send the text along with the username and password. Then we will take the text and compare with what we have stored in the session, right? So this is going to be the basic flow, right? So what I have done here, on session I have created a variable captcha and I have added captcha dot plain text, right? Then what I will say, response dot type. Okay, what this will be, type svg. Okay, and res dot send, it will say captcha dot data, right? So text we have stored in our backend and the data we are sending it to the server. Great. Now what we'll do, we'll come to auth routes. Okay, and I will say router dot post. Okay, and I will say captcha, and here what I will say, generate captcha. This method I will add. Okay, so generate captcha. Now I will open the terminal and I will start the server. Let us see if there are any errors. We'll fix and then we'll go to Postman. So no error, successfully connected to DB. Then I will open Postman and I have get captcha, right? And so this is going to be get request, right? So I will come to here router and I will add it as a get request, right? Because there is no data we are submitting, we are just asking for information, so this should be a get request. Okay, so I will come to Postman and I will send the request, right? See, we are getting a captcha image, right? And here I want to add it of 6 character length. Okay, So I will go to generate captcha. It's of course your choice, right? But I have seen in many places the usual standard is 6, right? So I will say 6. Okay, and I'll open Postman and I will send it. So if you see, we are generating captcha, right? So a few things I want to show you here. The noise, right? If you say 0, right, what will happen? You are seeing this many distortion, right? So there won't be much noise, right? Now it depends upon you, depends up to you how much noise you want, right? So for me, I want to add it to a sweet spot of 1, right? This is my personal preference. Based on how much noisy you want it to be, you can do this, right? Then there is color, let us make it an false and see what happens, right? So I will add this, and this looks black and white, right? Based on your front end need, if you want, you can configure this, right? So I'm keeping it as true, and I'm keeping the noise to 2, right? And I will send the request, right? This is my personal preference. This is my sweet spot. Okay. Now this is the captcha image, right? Now in this course, we have to read the captcha information many times, right? So what I will do, for me, sometimes it will be difficult, right, to read the captcha, especially the small case and uppercase, right? So just for my convenience, right, this will not go to production in general. So what I will do, I'll say console.log and I will say captcha.text. This is just a developer hack. Okay. So what will happen if I log this one and I will go to Postman and I will send a request, right? It says UQ4K U9 something, right? And I have to type this one. So instead of that, what I can do, I can come to console and copy it, right? Just my convenience, developer convenience. Okay, we don't have to actually read and add it, right? We have the mechanism, so we'll just come here, copy it, right? So it will be very easy for us, right? Without any confusion, without any captcha failures, right? Because at least I do make sometimes mistake when I try to add captcha, right? Many times it gives invalid captcha text, right? So I don't want to have this in this demo. So I'm adding a console log, right? So that if I send a request, it says 3vxxml, right? The same is logged here. So I can quickly come to console, copy, put it in Postman, send the request, right? Simple, right? So this is being done. Great. Now what we will do, we have to, now we are adding it into the session, right? Now we should be able to validate it, right? So how we are going to validate? Of course through a middleware, right? So let us write the middleware for this one. So here I'll create a folder and I will say middlewares, and I will add a file and I will call it as validate captcha.js, or I will rename it to a convention that if you see I'm following, right? Dot middleware.js. Okay. So if you see .middleware.js, .routes.js, right? .schema.js, .service.js, right? So this is the convention that I'm following here. Okay. So what I will do, I will say export const validate captcha equals to request response and next. So this is important when we are doing middleware, right? Next method. Then const captcha. Okay, this I'm getting from request.body. Okay, that means when I am sending the register user, here I have to add another field called captcha. Okay, so when you are making the front end, what you can do, you can create this many text field and you can create a captcha field, and before the captcha field you can call this API and load this image before that, right? The typical how UI looks for a captcha, right? So, and this spelling is not correct, I think captcha, now it is correct. Okay, so you have to load the text fields and whatever fields you want to load, like email field and password field, right? And you have to do a get call on this one. So this will load the captcha image. You can put it in your front end and then add another text field where the user can write the captcha information. Okay, then what we will do, I'll come to VS Code back and we will continue. Okay, so now where we have the captcha information, we have it in request.session.captcha, right? So I will first do validation. If not Okay, so if this session does not exist, and why this session will not exist? So if you see here, it has a max age of 1800, that is 3 minutes. So the captcha is valid for 3 minutes, right? So within 3 minutes, if you don't send, the cookie is by that time invalid, right? So that's why there might be a chance that this captcha is not valid anymore, or this captcha information is no longer stored in our server, right? So I will say, what I will do, I will add this statement, right? So what this will do, this will return with 400 status, and it will say captcha has expired, right? Then what we can do, if we have the captcha in this session, what we will do, we will compare this captcha with this captcha value. Okay, so what I will do, I will copy this line, okay, and equals to captcha, right? If this is not the case, right, not same, it means if user has sent the wrong information, what I can do, I can send a invalid captcha error message. So return response.status 400 and message invalid captcha, right? And if this is correct, then I can say request.session.captcha equals to null. So we will destroy the session information and we will call the next method, right? Great. So let us check the flow again. Read the captcha from the body, right? Then see if the captcha value exists in the session. If not, throw error. Then validate your session captcha versus the captcha sent by the user. If that is not same, if they don't match, throw out error. If it is correct, you have to void your session information, right? So that it cannot be used again, and then call the next method, right? Now where we are going to use this one, in our route. So here auth route. So before doing the registration here, that means before calling the register user, what I will do, I will call here the validate captcha method, right? So this will work as a middleware. So on register, it will first see if captcha is valid. If it is valid, it will come to register user service. Okay, let us test this flow. So what I will do, I will come to this MongoDB, and what I will do, I will delete this one. Okay, so delete it. Then I will come to user register. Okay, and before that, what I will do, I will generate a captcha, and when I generate, it will log it in the console. So I will copy that one, come to this captcha, and I will send. Now it says user registered successfully, right? Let us check the MongoDB, right? So user is registered successfully. Now let us test the negative scenario. So I'll generate a captcha. It has generated something, right? RVV, but this time I'm not sending the correct captcha, right? I'm sending some wrong value, right? So this is RGRVVRH something, right? I am sending RGRTYU, right? If I send this one, what it is saying? Invalid captcha, right? 400 bad request. Great. So now we have captcha integrated into our system. Now, so this captcha addition will save us from bot attacks and automated scripts, right? Now there is another potential security issue called as cross-site request forgery. So somebody who is not intended to submit a form, because ultimately this will be a form submit on the front end, right? Who is not intended to submit a form, they can also submit, because this is an open API, right? As such, we don't need to log in to register, right? Of course, that doesn't make sense. So somebody can make a cross-site request forgery attack in which there will be a hidden form, okay, and user by mistake, they can click on that, right? So that is how a typical CSRF attack works, right? So what we have to do, we have to send a authentication token to the client, so that next time if they have to submit the form, they have to send back the authentication token. If they don't send us the authentication token, that means they are not authorized to submit form back to us, right? That is the whole idea. So what we will do, we'll generate a CSRF token, right? So let us start working on the CSRF validation. So for that, what I will do, I will go to my VS Code, and here I'll add a new file, and I'll call it as CSRF service. Okay, So I'll say csrf.service.js. Okay. Then what I will do here also, we are going to follow the same basic logic. Okay. Here what we were doing in our Captcha service, what we are doing, we are generating a Captcha and then storing it in the session, right? Here on the CSRF service, we are going to generate a token, and that token we are going to store it in the session, right? And the flow will remain the same. So if the token exists in the session, as well as the token should be sent back from the post call, then it's a valid request. Otherwise there is a CSRF attack that has happened, right? So here on the CSRF service, what we will do, we will first import crypto module from crypto, right? And what I will say, export const, I will say generate, I will say CSRF token equals to request and response. Okay. Then first what I will do, I will check if a CSRF token already exists in the session, right? So if not request dot session dot CSRF token, okay, if this is the case, then only I will generate the session information. Okay, so here what I can say, request dot session dot CSRF token equals to, I'll say crypto dot random bytes of 32. Okay, and what I will do, I will say to string in hex format. Okay, so if a session doesn't already exist, CSRF session value doesn't already exist, then only I will add a CSRF token to the session. Okay, and what I will say, res dot status of 200. Okay, and JSON, here what I will say, CSRF token equals to request dot session dot CSRF token. That value, whatever we are stored in this session, that we will send. I'll come to Postman, then, and here on the CSRF token, right, I'll send a request. But before I send a request, what I have to do, I have to attach it to the router, right? So here I will say router dot get. Okay, what I will get, I will say CSRF token. Okay, and what value I will say, generate CSRF token, right? Then I'll come to the Postman. Okay, and I'll send a request. Okay, so this will generate a CSRF token for me, right? Now what I will do, I will write a middleware. Okay, so here I will say new file, then I'll say validate CSRF dot middleware dot JS. Okay, and here what I will do, I'll do the CSRF validation, and it is going to be very similar to how we did in the Captcha validation, right? So I will say export const validate CSRF token, okay, equals to, I'll say request response and next method. Okay, then first what I will do, I will say const CSRF token that is sent by the user. Okay, now how the user is sending the CSRF token, they can send it in body, but the usual convention is send it in the header, and the header name by convention is X CSRF token. Okay, so I'll say headers. Okay, and it will be X CSRF token. Okay, then I'll say const session CSRF token equals to request dot session dot CSRF token, right? So where we are setting this one on the CSRF service, right? So here we set request dot session dot CSRF token, right? So that same value we are reading here, right? Then what we will do, we'll do validation of this both, right? If any of them doesn't exist throughout the error, right? So if not CSRF token, okay, what we can say, I will just copy this line, it will return 400 status, and it says request cannot be processed, right? Simple. And the same thing that I can do on the session CSRF token also, right? So I'll copy the if condition and change it to CSRF session token, right? And I'm giving the same error message that request cannot be processed, right? That means something fishy is happening, right? So if a person is trying to genuinely submit a form, right, he should first ask for a CSRF token and that add it there in your post method, right? Then only the server will accept it, right? So if the token or if the session value doesn't exist, then we'll simply cannot process the request. Okay. Then what we will do, of course, we'll do the validation, right? So if, okay, what session CSRF token not equals to the CSRF token that is sent by the user, right? What we will do, we'll copy this line and paste it here, right? That means both the tokens should be available and even they should match, right? If this is not the case, that means the token is sent and is valid. We'll say request.session.csrf token equals to null. The same thing we did with Captcha, right? And we'll call the next method, right? Great. Now what we will do, we'll come to register user. Okay, and let me generate a new Captcha, right? And I'll come to VS Code and copy the Captcha information, right? So see, this is how convenient this is if when I have added a console log, right? So I'll add the Captcha information and we'll generate a CSRF token. Okay, and what I will do, I will come to Postman and I will delete this record so that will not get the error message that the username is already taken, right? Because we are playing around, right? So I'll send the request. Let us see what happens, right? User registered successfully. Great. But you would be wondering where I have set this token. I have not set it anywhere, right? Did you see me add it anywhere? If you see headers, I'm not adding anything, right? But it is still saying user registered successfully. How it is able to read the header information, right? So there is a bit of magic that is happening. Okay, Postman magic, I'll show you. So every time you generate a information in which we are supposed to receive a cookie, where we are supposed to receive a cookie, here, say for example, on the Captcha service, what we are doing, we are sending something to the cookie information, right? We are sending something to the session, right? Now when I submit the request, how this will know whose session this is, right? There could be multiple users, right? I'm sending the request, you are sending the request, right? And Captcha information is set at the session level. But how this will distinguish which one is your request versus which one is my request, right? That is the question. Now in order to distinguish between two different requests, that means for each user or for each session, a new session variable is created, right? That's what session means, right? So new session will be created, but how it will distinguish, right? So what this will do, it will in the body, it will send the necessary information, right? In Captcha, it is sending the Captcha image. In CSRF token, it is sending us the token, right? But along with this, if you see the cookies, it is sending a particular cookie and it is named as connect.sid, right? This is the important part here. Specifically in the browser, this cookie will be set by the server. And since this is a HTTP only cookie, how I am saying HTTP only cookie? Because this says HTTP only to be true, right? So this is a HTTP only cookie. That means client side code or JavaScript cannot read this information. And when you send request next time, you have to send this cookie ID. With this cookie ID, it will know, it will distinguish your session versus my session, right? So if my session is set with a Captcha and your session is set with another Captcha, right? If I send this cookie information, because this cookie information is sent to me, right? So I have to send back this cookie information. Based on this cookie information, my session will be restored, and from my session the Captcha or the CSRF token value will be read, right? And if you are sending your cookie information, your Captcha image will be read, or your Captcha text or your CSRF token will be read, right? So this is mandatory to send back on every request. Okay, on browser it will automatically happen. Browser automatically sends the server side cookies. Okay, this is a server side cookie. Why? Because server set this cookie, right? Where it has set the cookie? Here on the index.js, right? It has set a cookie, right? And based on this cookie, each individual session will be identified. Okay, Now, what is the magic I am doing here? So here, if you go to script section, okay, let me get some more space here. Okay, so here there are two things, okay, in Postman that you can do: prescript and postscript. Okay, prescript means something that will run before you send a request, and postscript means something that you will read that will execute after the response has come. Okay, so here what I am doing, I am saying cookie pm.response.headers.get set cookie. Okay, so what I'm essentially doing here, I'm trying to get the cookie information from the environment variables. Okay, then what I'm doing, if a valid cookie is received, okay, or if any number of cookies are there, so usually cookies are in terms of comma separated values. Okay, so what I'm doing, I'm reading the 0th index. That means for now I have only one cookie, right? That is for sure. One cookie is being sent, right? So I'm reading that cookie information, and what I am doing, pm.environment.set. What I am setting, this variable with this value. Okay, what is this value? This value is the cookie information. Okay, and this is the name in Postman environment. Okay, so essentially what I am doing, reading the cookie information and setting it in the Postman environment. Okay, the same thing I am doing here for CSRF token as well. Okay, so if you see, if this response, okay, has a CSRF token, that means if I am getting a valid CSRF token, what I am doing, pm.environment.set CSRF token, what, response.csrf token. This is the key, this is the value from where I am getting from the response. Okay, that means this is the response object, and from there I am taking the CSRF, I am taking the CSRF token, right, and I am setting it in the environment variable in Postman, right? Now the magic here on register user. Okay, register user, I'll go to script, and here I'll go to prescript. Okay, prescript, I'll read these two environment variables that I have set previously. Okay, then what I'm saying, pm.request.headers.add, what header it will add a cookie header, and value will be connect SID. So here this is the connect SID, which is this one. Okay, connect.sid, that I am reading from the cookie variable that was sent. Okay, response header, I am setting set cookie value. Okay, so this value I am setting it as a header. Okay, similarly pm postman.request.headers.add, what header I am adding, x CSRF token. Okay, value will be CSRF token that I have set here in this line. Okay, here what I am setting, environment variable in Postman, right, and that same environment variable I am reading here. I have read it here, store it in variables, and before I send a request, I am adding the necessary headers. One header is cookie header, in which I am sending cookie ID or the connect SID, and in another header I am sending CSRF token. Otherwise, if I don't do this, what I have to do, I have to come here, generate a CSRF token, I have to copy it here, right, then I will come here, I'll come to headers, then I'll create X, right, CSRF token, and add the value here, right, and next time when I have to send it again, I'll come here, I'll generate, I will copy, I'll come here, I'll paste, then only I will be able to send a request, right? So instead of that, what I have done, I have added scripts, right, something new for you to learn and something convenient, right? So that's why I have added scripts. So we have to send this information. Okay, and so this I showed you how you will add a CSRF token, right? So let me delete this one, otherwise multiple CSRF token will be sent, right? So this is how we have to send it, right? So if you are doing it in the front end, right, you don't have to do all these scripts, right? So in your cookie, the connect SID will be there and it will automatically be sent, right? And CSRF token, you have to do a get call and add it here in your headers, right, when you are sending a Axios request or whatever front-end framework you are using, right? So their header you have to send this header, and this header will be automatically sent on your behalf. If not, you can send it, and most of the time you will not be able to read the cookie information, right? Why? Because this is a HTTP only cookie. That means server can only read this, right? Now there is another property, secure. This is false, right? When this should be true, when we are working with HTTPS, right? In that case, if the cookie is marked as true, then only it will be sent. If it is marked as false on a HTTPS environment, this cookie will not be sent, right? So this is another secure information. Anyways, here it is localhost. We are not dealing with HTTPS. So this cookie is false, secure is false, right? Otherwise, this should have been true. Okay. So this is all about cookie information, right? And you learn something new on the Postman, right? How you can write prescript and postscript to make our work convenient, right? So of course, this you will find it in the repository that I will be sharing. And we have CSRF token, we have Captcha validation, and we are able to register the user, right? Great. So with this, on this particular Auth Masterclass, the user registration part is completed. And next we will see user login, right? And I really hope that you will like this video. If you like this video, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, because this is the kind of content I keep bringing on this channel. And I'll see you in the next part of this authentication and authorization masterclass series.